Today's World Insight. China's own brand of major country diplomacy towards an equitable world order and peace. So what sets apart China's diplomatic approach from others? How has Chinese diplomacy aided global governance?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Over the past decade, China has wielded major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics toward world peace. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the 31st APEC Economic Leaders Meeting where he said Asia-Pacific countries must act in solidarity and cooperation to meet challenges, build an Asia-Pacific community with a shared future, and start a new era in Asia-Pacific development. At the recently concluded G20 summit, China laid out its actions for global development and advocated for a fair, equitable global governance system. How big of a difference could China's approach make in global governance? Time to loop in our panelists. Joining us in Kuala Lumpur, Azmi Hassan, Senior Fellow at the Nusantara Academy for Strategic Research in Malaysia. In Beijing, Rong Ying, Chair Professor at Sichuan University, Senior Research Fellow from the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Major country diplomacy, that concept was raised 10 years ago. Now, a decade has passed. What does that mean for China's diplomacy and also for China's contribution to global governance? Let me ask you, Mr. Rong, how should we understand this phrase, major country diplomacy? For many of our viewers, it might be a phrase not necessarily that familiar with.
Sure. I think the concept of major country diplomacy, as a matter of fact, I think major achievements for China's diplomacy or China's interaction with the outside world, both in terms of theory and practice. If you look at the theoretical sort of a dimension, the past 10 years more have seen that China have founded and developed that theory, or theoretical framework called Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy. And in practice, we have seen that not only, I think, more proactive, but I think more sort of progress and achievement that made out of this theoretical framework. Well, certainly, I think BRI, the concept or the vision of building a community of shared future for mankind, and the 3 global initiatives, so on and so forth. All in all, from the Chinese viewpoint, that reflects, I think, President Xi's political philosophy in terms of governance, and it is a reflection of China's diplomacy. Right. And it's a very much constituent a major part of Xi Jinping's thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics for new era.
Mr. Hassan, we have seen as a result of turbulence in the world, leaders in major countries are trying to come up with their solutions or remedy. And China has been also making its contribution, in which major country diplomacy is believed to be part of it. Now, how do you see China's proportion in terms of contribution? How much does what does it mean for others?
Looking at the title itself, Tian Wei, for me, it's very hard to understand. I think for the Westerners, looking at the title also, it's going to be very difficult to understand what does it mean. Major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. Very interesting title in there. But again, let me give one simple example, Tian Wei. Last year, when Beijing became the middleman, brokering peace, diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and also Iran, from my point of view, no other major country can negotiate so that Riyadh and Tehran can talk. They just cannot talk with each other. They have been being enemy for such a long time. Then suddenly last year, Beijing announced that Saudi Arabia and the Iranians are talking with each other. I think this is a good example, a very clear example. If any major country use their diplomacy power, whether soft or hard power, you can basically create a more peaceful, global nature of the world.
But what are some of the necessary components of the theory, you think? And how is it different from the others or similar?
There is a little bit difference when President Xi Jinping, he never missed the term shared future, a win-win situation. Tianwei, I use another example. RCEP, for example, between 10 ASEAN nations plus China, New Zealand, Japan, Australia, and South Korea, these are two different economies. And RCEP, I think, is the biggest FTA, free trade agreement, 2 years ago, has been inked. Now, it come to materialize because superpower like China want a win-win situation. It never take advantage of smaller nation in ASEAN. It encompasses that everybody can have a say, every nation can be in a winning situation, meaning that the big power won't take advantage of the small nation. I hope I'm clear. My understanding of I would say, this particular diplomacy that was introduced a decade ago.
Since you talk about China and ASEAN, as you are based there in Malaysia, Mr. Hassan, may I follow up by asking about a thorny issue such as the South China Sea? I understand now China is in negotiation with its partners that are playing different roles on the issue of South China Sea, including with some of the members of ASEAN. So how is that negotiation reflecting what you call the major country, or what we call the major country diplomacy?
I think the South China Sea dispute is a very good example. And Malaysia was, I think, thickly involved. Yes, Malaysia and Beijing has its own problem in South China Sea, but it doesn't hinder our two nations to trade with each other. I think for the last 15 years, is Malaysia biggest trading partner. In the background, we have the South China Sea issue. It is a big issue in Malaysia. It's a big issue, very sensitive issue, but it doesn't stop Malaysia to be more friendly with China, even though United States is coming in. Come be more friendly with us compared to China in this case. No, I'm not making this up. It is something like that. So I think this is a good example where it's a win-win situation. Let's stop. And you mentioned negotiation about the code of conduct has been going on for 15 years, 16 years. But let's stop so that the final outcome, everybody is a winner. I think this is a very clear example of what we are talking about today, the Chinese diplomacy, Tianwei.
Mr. Rong, to you, we have seen one initiative after another regarding global governance and global economic and trade interactions proposed by China. How do you see these initiatives combined, approximately carved out a vision that China proposes to the rest of the world as to what should be the rule, what should be the basic ground that we can all subscribe to? And can China be resilient in playing a supporting role in these initiatives?
The most important thing is always practice. In practice, now, as that is very much related to your question, the initiatives. So first up with these initiatives. These initiatives have mostly or primarily, I think, meant to provide a kind of a platform or means to help achieve China's goals for peaceful development and to build a favorable environment, a world for China. For China development and the other members as well. That comes to the idea or the vision of a global community of shared future. And to achieve that, BRI comes into play because BRI is the practice platform practice to implement, to follow this initiative. All in all, I think China has tried its best for the past 10 years more, not only to come up it's a kind of a theoretical or conceptual framework for its diplomacy, more importantly, for, I think, concrete practice and approaches, in not only in managing, building a favorable environment, more importantly, working with all the countries in the world, big and small, to address the common challenges and also some specific problems, territorial distribution and so forth. And the last point is that as China grows, as China develops, I think it increasingly that it would have to play a more important role economically, security aspects, and even in terms of sort of cultural or civilizational dialogue. That's the three global initiatives are important. This is a vision that is going to make a huge difference from the existing or the past history of rising power, bringing impact, the system, the order, and creating a big problem even among the rising power and established power.
Now, China raised these initiatives at a time when the world is getting ever more fragmented. We are also going to see probably an elevated version of that fragmentation for the next few years, given the latest geopolitical and political climate in some economies. So how will those initiatives be realized? By the way, none of these initiatives can be done by one country. It has to be shared and commonly practiced. So that is a very interesting question, isn't it? Mr. Hassan.
Well, Tianwei, you didn't mention exactly the political situation. Let me put it right away. Next year, January 20th, when the 47th President of the United States comes in, President Donald Trump, where President Trump wants to close its economy, wants to protect its industry, want its industry to invest inside the United States. But President Xi Jinping is opening up China, something that very hard to see maybe a decade ago before President Xi Jinping took over China. So I think, yes, even though the United States is only one country, Tianwei and Mr. Rongyi, but again, it is the biggest economy. So it is going to be very, very difficult, very, very challenging come January 20th after this, and not to mention that Donald Trump wants to impose an extra 10% on top of 25% tariff that he wants to impose on its neighbor, Canada to the north and to the south, Mexico. So this is something that protectionism, unilateral decision. So it's going to be very difficult, but I guess in the next few years, United States, Tianwei, will be isolated. So whether you like it or not, the United States have to work with other nations, such as China and other bigger economies, so that multilateralism is the key word at that particular juncture, where though protectionism, I think it will stunt the growth. Tianwei, yes, it's going to be a very, very difficult next year or the next 4 years, but I'm sure that China, with its open economy, together with Europe, maybe European nation, they are talking with each other right now so that tariff can be reduced. It can be worked together as an example. Example to United States, you need to open up and put less protection.
No country wants to stand in lines in the perceived rivalry. For example, China and the United States. Of course, China has always been suggesting it is not pursuing any rivalry with any country, including the United States. So as a result of that, how will these initiatives be implemented when you see countries are more willing to work on specific issues rather than subscribing to any specific policy lines or rhetorics?
Yeah, that is, again, a great question. I think for as far as I can see, the past few years since the initiation of this initiative, let me start with the Global Initiative, Development Initiative. I think once they are not, with thanks to the efforts of China, that initiative, Global Development Initiative, has formed a kind of a global initiative for, I think, friends, something like that, that those who support or share the vision can work together. And that initiative is not one stand alone. Rather, it is meant to help and, as a matter of fact, indeed, to synergize, to supplement the effort by the UN. The UN's Sustainable Development Goals 2030. So that is, I think, the idea. The idea of this initiative is not to put a different sort of totally different system or mechanism from the current one. As the Chinese sometimes say, they not want to set up a new kitchen, rather want to make the old kitchen, the existing kitchen, more functional, more effective. The global security initiative, I think, becomes now more and more important in the context where we have two ongoing crises, and there are many other mini crises, conflict. And to make sure these crises, these conflicts will not expand or spill over, I think here the initiative comes into play. The security common, comprehensive, cooperative, sustainable security concept. I think now we have to do more. Next year is going to be the 80th anniversary of the founding of the UN. And the UN has, with thanks to efforts of Secretary General, have the future summit for future sort of compact. And let us hope, let us work together to make this world continuously being better.
So far, many are watching the relationship between China and the United States. After all, it is the biggest economies of the world. How do you see the relationship between the two is likely to reflect the real nature of China's diplomacy, and also how others are likely to interact with the result of this relationship between China and the United States, and China's reaction to that interaction? What would that tell about the nature of China's diplomacy?
Yes, very true indeed, Tianwei. I think the relationship between Washington and Beijing, especially with the incoming president, will be very closely looked. For this two type of diplomacy to talk with each other, it's going to be very, very difficult. One is the economy issue, but the reason behind it is a non-economy issue, similar to Mexico. Stop the migrants from Mexico, from America Latin, then we will put aside the tariffs. Something got nothing to do with each other. So in this case, talking back about the China-style diplomacy and also United States-style diplomacy, especially with the president-elect style, it is going to be, I say it again, I'm not trying to be a very try to paint a bleak picture, Tianwei, but I'm saying it as it is. It's going to be very, very difficult, but as Mr. Rong Yi said, let's hope for the better. So I'm hoping that President Xi and also President-elect Donald Trump can talk to each other and open up the communication. As we have known, Trump said he's a deal maker. So hoping that deal can be made after January 20th, Jiang Wei.
So far, China has been emphasizing on the importance of dialogue. And there are at this moment, still some existing mechanisms of dialogue between China and the United States, at least until January the 20th. Now, go to you, Mr. Rong Ying. How do you see the relationship play out between China and the United States? How China handle this relationship with Washington will reflect the nature of China's major country diplomacy, and how will China interact with others with the result of bilateral relations between China and the United States?
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, what China, at least so far, would like to, the message that China would like to send out by the recent meeting between President Xi and President Biden. I think in the meeting, China made very clear the goal, the objective is for China is to have a stable relationship. And for achieve that stable relationship, there are three guiding principles: mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. I think that very much conforms to the guiding thinking or the philosophy of China's diplomacy, the Xi Jinping sort of diplomacy of peace and the kind of a strong sense of responsibility as a major country for not only for itself, but also for the region and for the world. This is, I think, my understanding. And of course, the 7 points of common understanding that I think, as far as China is concerned, arising from the past 4 years of interaction between China and the United States, also very much helps in following through, providing a framework to following through these principles, right, or to manage these things. And last but not least, of course, fully understanding the differences, divergences, and the possibility or the danger of confrontation. So China worked very closely with United States for managing the differences in a constructive way. Last but not least, China also made it very clear that there are red lines. There are something China holds very, clear, and which that is the 4 lines of red lines on the question of Taiwan, the question of China's development, and so on and so forth. These should not be serve as a bottom line, right, and red line should not be broken.
Right.
And if the framework is applied, and I think the relationship, definitely we can expect a stable relationship. Yeah. And that thinking, that framework should be welcomed and supported by other countries as well, because nobody wants to see China and the United States to have a confrontation.
We see the concept of not only South-South cooperation, but also the global South rising over the past few years, particularly with the fragmentation that we are also witnessing today in our world. How is that concept becoming such an important one today, and what could it mean for both China when it comes to major country diplomacy or others that are being categorized as global South? And what is the nature of this global South vis-a-vis or hand in hand with the global North? Mr. Hassan.
First of all, Tianwei, I'm quite uneasy with the concept of global South and also global North, because as if similar to United States and China, they are not. The perception is not. They are not working hand in hand. Global South versus global North. But again, as a conclusion, Tianwei, I see that Chinese diplomacy or China diplomacy has been greatly misunderstood or has been greatly spin. Look at BRI, for example. It has been spinning so wild that it accused China use BRI to subdue other country, to colonize other countries. So as I see it, it has been misunderstood in this particular major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. I think more knowledge or more media warfare need to be made in this particular Chinese style of diplomacy. Tianwei.
Mr. Rong, Global South?
Yeah. Global South certainly, I think, and not a new fact, such a new factor, but rather a kind of a reality where with which we have to sort of live with, and more importantly, I think we have to address. But because that grouping, if I can say, not only represents those underprivileged or unrepresented countries for the current international system, international order. Rather, I think arguably they constitute the forces to build, to improve, to reform the current international order or international system that, or global governance that would help to address the challenges, the problems we are facing. Look at the poverty issues, look at the climate change issues, look at in the global geopolitical sort of a shift where I think as the Global South rise as a group, their aspiration, their, I think, demand should be properly addressed. Unfortunately, the past few decades, there are more rhetoric and little progress. And China is such an example. And China's vision or Chinese diplomacy is, I think, pushing the international system, international order, the global governance to be reformed in the fact that in the direction where they have become more effective, more representative, and more inclusive in a way that to help work together to address the common challenge, not building a different groups, a parallel system where some exclusive groups, some powers can continue to enjoy their privilege or their power at the expenses of these global south and the stability and the prosperity of the world as a whole.
Rong Ying, Azmi Hassan, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us.